Lloyd Vance's Inside of Football is back for another evening on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. So glad to be with you this evening. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Unfortunately, the NFL season, man, we got to put a bow on this thing. And in terms of the on field action, uh, there won't be anything to talk about weekly, but we have a lot to go over. We have the combine coming up around February 25th into the beginning of March. Then we'll do everything to get us ready and ready to go for April, the end of April. It's Christmas in April. I used to look forward to that day more than anybody. Not as much because there's so many busts now, but the NFL draft, we'll look forward to that and get you ready for that. But first and foremost, um, you know, here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Broad Street South Network, we are going to talk about, and I can see Kevin, Angel, I can hear you. Yes. All right. All right. Hopefully, Angel will bring up your picture in a second. Of course, we almost gave up on Kevin, but there he is. He did the technical difficulties, figured out. I can hear him, so hopefully everybody else can. Kevin Midgette, my sidekick, is back joining me. Angel was lucky enough to be in the Super Bowl, or unlucky enough. We were just talking about the hotel prices were out of hand there in Vegas, but it seemed like he had a great time at Tony Bruno Network, and they had some great shows. And he and I were comparing notes to my old days on Radio Row and what he saw. So, Angel, we got Kevin. Kevin, what a crazy Super Bowl. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there, and like anybody from the Philadelphia area, and I know you're an Eagles fan, you always in the back of your mind, it's like I heard from so many family and friends. I hope they both lose. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah.
They're talking about last year the Chiefs beat the Eagles, and then of course everybody hates the Niners, and all my cousins and father who's a season ticket holder, they call them the Whiners. But I thought it was a great game overall in terms it was overtime, back and forth effort. But it also, in the end of the day, you got to talk about the greatness of Patrick Mahomes. It's almost like you're talking about, when I was coming up and you were Gretzky, Jordan at the peak of where they were. You hated to see them on the other side. You know what I mean? And he's just a tremendous talent, willed his team to victory.
The one thing I will say that the guy's a winner. You can't take it away from him. He just has that. Once again, it's the Reggie Miller. It's like winning time. It's clutch gene. He has it. Certain people have it, certain people don't. And that's the problem with been the 49ers, their two Super Bowl runs against them. Jimmy G, Purdy. Purdy didn't play a horrible game, but he also didn't guide them to the victory as well. So Mahomes and Reed with that win right there, that gets him into the pantheon of GOATs. And now you're starting to get it mentioned with that. I mean, Mahomes, think about it. If he would be Brady in that one, he'd had four already. That's insane at
Yeah,
his
it's
age.
great. He's 28 years old, and we're talking about the greatness of him at this stage in his career. Like he's, you know, Tom Brady and Joe Montana. These guys that were older when they were completing their runs, and he's 28. And as long as Red wants to stick around as a head coach, he's going to be 6-6 next year. This team could go on that run and try to. The Patriots have 6 championships. I think they're tied with. I'm trying to think the Steelers as the most ever. And then you have Tom Brady's 7 championships out there. Nobody else can touch that. So, but Mahomes right now at 28, as you said, he's already tied with Troy Aikman's a Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? Remember how dominant those Cowboys teams were, and everybody was like, "Oh, they won 3 championships. They're a dynasty." Well, the Chiefs, you got to put them in that ilk now. This is back to back, first time done since the 03-04 Patriots, very long time, and you got to give them their flowers. And in terms of the uh, game started slow, and I just kept. I think I was texting with you and Angel, a bunch of everybody back and forth, and I was just saying, the Chiefs are going to make the adjustments at halftime. As Usher was out there dancing around and hanging out with Alicia Keys, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody singing, yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Andy Reid's in the back. He's figuring out a way take out the Niners, and that's what they did. They did adjustments, and you just always had that feeling that the Chiefs were going to figure out a way to win this game. And unfortunately for the young Niners, they found a way to lose it.
Well, you got to think about the evolution of Andy Reid as a coach. He could always coach. There was no doubt about it. The man knows football in and out. It's the fact that he's developed his own coaching skill set from the Eagles, where he could be the Andy Championship guy, where he wouldn't make adjustments in the time clock management and everything else. And then you see the Kansas City Andy version, and there are adjustments made. He doesn't worry about. He doesn't try to be as, I should say, sexy and pretty with his game plan calling. He's about winning now. And he's like, all right, this is working. Let's
Yeah.
do that. And he's not
And
about the show numbers.
right. And us being in the Philadelphia area, that's a big topic on the talk radio scene around here. How do you feel about Andy Reid in terms of everybody, like, he's this lovable grandpa that's been in KC for about 12 years now, 3 championships. But I always tell everybody, I was like, look, I still remember the guy that was 1-4 in NFC championship games. You talk about the non-adjustments and the home losses in those big games, and also he was very gruff. You know what I mean? He was not. Can you imagine the old Andy Reid if one of the Eagles, like say Jeremiah Trotter, bumped into him the
Oh,
way that
Lord.
Travis Kelce did?
Oh,
What do you
Lord.
think that would have ended up like?
Oh, they'd be off the team. When Travis Kelce did that, I was like, are you kidding me? And Andy, though, once again, because maybe he knows he needs Travis Kelce that much, maybe the attention with Travis Kelce, maybe he's just the maturation of the coaching process. But early Andy, no, no, no.
Yeah, he would have got the cameras out, and it may be turned physical right back at the player. But
Yeah.
it was funny how they laughed it off, and they just kept moving in the game. Now, in terms of the game action, we talked about both sides. Brock Purdy, I thought he did a pretty good job in the game. Everybody thought he was waiting for him to fall apart. Everybody's Mr. Irrelevant. They bring it up over and over again. And I think I talked about it with Rich Q on his show. A lot of people just kind of, in my opinion, need to let that go and kind of, he's past that. He took his
He's
team to the
earned it.
Super
He's
Bowl.
earned it.
He's 23 of 38 in the game, 61 percentage. That's not as high as normal. 255, one TD, no interceptions. He was only sacked once. So Chris Jones was getting into passing lanes. They had some key tips, particularly on a third down, but only that one sack. So intermittent pressure on him. Some may say the best pass was thrown by Jawan Jennings on
Facts.
that TD to Christian McCaffrey. That was a huge play. So talk a little bit about the Niners before we jump back over to where with the Chiefs.
I think the pass that was thrown by Juwan, that thing hung in the air forever, it felt like.
Oh,
It
yeah.
just took from what it was like a balloon being passed across the field, but no one got to it. And Susan McCaffrey got it. That was it. He was gone. He was to the house on that one. San Francisco, they they played a well decent game. They just didn't do what they needed to do to win. And that's going to be the moniker that's going to follow Shanahan around his whole career now.
Yeah.
With being with Atlanta, with these two Super Bowls, double digit leads, he can't close it out. And he's going to fall into the Schottenheimer kind of category and everything else. The Marv Levy's, it's like you can get there, but you can't close it out.
Yeah. And he's always going to be in his father's shadow until he gets that W. And you talked about that. This is the third time that he had a team with the lead and they just couldn't get it done. Obviously, with the Falcons in 2017, they were up 28-3. He's the offense coordinator of that team. Dan Quinn's the head coach. But, they spread that around, and that's on his shoulders. Then the 10-point lead to the hated Chiefs in 2020, and then Jimmy G misses the overthrow, and they lose that game. So, as you said, Patrick Mahomes is almost like he's like Michael Myers or Freddy, Freddy in horror movies. You got to kill him when you got the chance. And they had their opportunities. I mean, he threw a bad interception in this game. They had the chances where both defenses were doing a great job keeping their team in this game. And I just thought a lot of times the Niners just kind of failed to capitalize on the Chiefs and getting them off the field in key situations. Now, there was 10 punts in this game, 5 for each side. So each of the offenses kind of had their opportunities. But when I look at the Niners in terms of offense, they only converted 3 of 12 third downs. So that just kind of showed you the difficulty that they were having the key moments in the game. Obviously, in overtime, they got the call that kind of helped keep that drive going. But another big thing, and I talked about in the preview with Rich last week, uh, the kickers came into play. Both kickers had a pretty darn good game. Moody was 3 for 3. I was picking on him going in. He even hit a 55-yarder. I'm saying to my kids, there's no way he's making this. He drills it. But he
Oh, that
got
was a
that
banger. That was a banger when he hit
extra,
that one.
and that extra point got blocked, though. So that was huge. That extra point, Mahomes only has to come down and get a field goal to tie the game instead of having to get a touchdown to take the lead. And they were able to do that. And then on the other side, Butker, you know, ice cold 4-4, hit a 57-yarder. It was a low line drive kick, and that thing could have made 65 yards. So they're indoors. Obviously, it helps them. But the Niners had a lot of fight. But as you said, they just made a couple key mistakes here and there. And a big one I'm going to get your comments on is that bad special teams fumble by Darrell Luter is the guy that kind of hit off his foot, and then Ray McLeod fumbles it. And that kind of turned the game because if you remember, the Chiefs came out, they were 3-and-out when they got the ball in the second half. So talk about that turnover and do you think the Niners can pick things up in the future, or what are you thinking?
I think it's one of those games where these teams were evenly matched up. It's like it comes down to once again special teams. And the two biggest plays in that game was the muff punt and also the block extra point. And that was
Yeah.
it. And that came down to it. And that's why Kansas City won this game. It wasn't because of anything else. Everyone, in and out, The one thing I was thinking about, though, I didn't get a chance to speak with you about this the last 2 weeks with the Baltimore Ravens game with Kansas City and everything else. When you're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, there is a mental block playing them in the playoffs. It's like you have to beat them, and it's like, and you know that, and it's like even when you're winning, it's like, they're waiting for that moment for the Kansas City Chiefs to turn it on. I used to equivalent it to people that fought Mike Tyson. You got a couple shots in on Mike in the first round or two. It's like, all right, but you're waiting for Mike to go Mike at this point. And it's like it's almost like a mental hurdle to get past the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you're the San Francisco 49ers in this game and you have those two big, flubs on special teams, that's got to weigh on your psyche just a tad.
Yeah, and you got to have play a complete game. You got to play all 4 quarters, and you got to stay as clean as possible. I know it's hard not to have any turnovers, and they did a good job in terms of sacks, but you can't have those negative plays. The Niners also had 6 penalties for 40 yards, so both teams had 6 penalties, so that wasn't really a huge factor. I thought for the most part the officials stayed out of the game pretty well. But you're right, you got to step on their neck. You can't give them an inch because that whole time, even with Mahomes, you're like, you give him a chance, he's going to hurt you. And I wanted to hear your take on the big debate was they win the coin toss. Warner's out there against Mahomes on the coin toss, and Shanahan told him to take the ball. With the new overtime rules, I would have thought the big advantage is put your defense on the field, and then kind of you can see from there what to do. But they decide to take the ball. They did a nice job moving it down, but then it drive stalls. And then I didn't get to talk to you about this because we last time, but Shanahan had that key. Should I go for it and look like the next Dan Campbell if I don't get it, or
Truth.
he chose to
Man.
score field goal. All right, so they get to 3 points, opens the door for Mahomes, and you're like, they're going to take this ball and they're going to drive it, and that's just what they did.
I think it's fascinating to me, and I know everyone for the most part has heard it at this point, is Chris Jones was talking about it. Andy Reid during training camp was talking about playoff overtime rules. He emphasized it throughout the season. Each playoff game, he let them know the playoff rules. And then you have guys from the San Francisco 49ers after the biggest game of the year didn't know the Super Bowl rules, didn't know the playoff rules for overtime. How is that
Yeah.
possible? I mean, Shanahan and his guys might have talked about it. How do the players not know? Andy Reid, those guys knew to defer it, to accept it. The players knew that going out there. It was reinforced in them, and that was something where Shanahan dropped the ball. These guys didn't know. And it brings me back to the Donovan McNabb Bengals game. I didn't know the rules of overtime. It's your job. Learn the rules. Learn the rules.
Yeah, yeah. And Mahomes said in an after press conference, he was like, man, they kept going over it over and over again all week in the meetings. I was tired of hearing about it, but you know what? They were prepared, and that's what the best teams do. As much as a lot of people didn't like the Belichick Brady Patriots. Those teams were so well prepared. They had a game plan for every scenario, and they were coached up on it. And Andy Reid has done a great job in terms of this staff that he's built. Brett Veach is the general manager. They got a lot of talent on the team, even though they have this huge contract with Patrick Mahomes, the largest hit by a quarterback that won a Super Bowl. I think his hit was around $40 million this year. They're going to try to restructure that. And a team that just kind of stayed the course. All season, everybody was like, oh, they led the league in the NFL with 44 drops, and they're a mess. And he got those guys playing, when it came time in the playoffs, particularly last night. I know, like, MVS caught that touchdown. He was almost fighting himself as he caught it. You could see he's like, oh, I don't want to drop this,
Well, you remember the Eagles game where he dropped it and went right through his fingers. Yeah, so it's in his head.
And everybody killed him on it, and the Eagles beat him. And that surprisingly, I was looking at the story of their season, and the Eagles were one of the teams. All right, the Eagles beat them. Let's talk about who beat them. They lost at Denver. That was like that egregious loss. You're like, what's going on here? This team's falling apart. They lost to Philadelphia on the MVS play, as you said. They lost at Green Bay in a game where Mahomes was not good. He missed some huge throws in that game, and there were some drops in that one as well. I think there were some penalties in that one. Think about this one. They lost to the Raiders, and the game was in Kansas City. So that might have been the low point of that season. And after that, they just won on a roll, and they've won 6 straight games all the way through the playoffs. So after that Raiders loss, they beat the Bengals. I know Joe Burrow was not playing, but they ostracized them, got rid of them. They won at the Chargers in a huge road game for their division rights. And then they took care of Miami in the playoffs. They went to Buffalo. That proved Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid could go on the road. That was like the first time.
First time.
And then they went at Baltimore, as you said. That really showed me a lot, because I was talking about that Baltimore number 1 rated defense all season, and they were able to move the football, and they just had no fear and consistency with them. And then they knock off the NFC's best team, the Niners, in a Super Bowl. So no one could say they got lucky or they ducked anybody. They just kind of flicked that switch, and they knew when the games counted most that they could get it done. And it all revolves around their quarterback. But also, you can't help but tip your hat to, you talk about a former Eagles guy on that staff. It's Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, this guy is just tremendous. He beat Tom Brady in 07 and 11, with those Giants team. Some were saying that Giants team, one of them was a 10-win team, the other one's a 9-win team, and they both beat the Patriots when people thought, and he had that game plan. And he did it once again against the Niners, who were just explosive. Guys like Bolton had 13 tackles to lead the team. He had McDuffie running around there, making big plays, Snead. And you talk about Jones and Kalafdaitis on that D-line. But talk about the job that Spagnuolo did in this game.
Spags is one of those guys, and I want to say he's in the Jim Johnson mold. As a head coach, no. He's not that guy. As a defensive coordinator, that's your guy. That's your guy that's going to sit there. He's going to get the game plan. He's going to snuff some things out right there. Because I think that was very underrated. Mahomes gets the press. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift get the press. Spags in that defense was the heart of that team. And that's why they won this Super Bowl. And there's no doubt about that. Yeah. Without the job that Spags did with scouting out, with everything with the Niners, the skill set players that the Niners had, looking next to the ones that the Kansas City Chiefs have, Niners had the better skill set players. And the fact that Spags could hold those guys to what he did, there's a reason why they won another Super Bowl.
Yeah, and when I started crunching numbers for the Niners, McCaffrey was very beat up at the end of this game. You could see he was physically tired. I mean, he had um, he had 30 touches in the game, so he had 22 rushes for 80 yards. He had that big first quarter fumble, was very not like him, and then he had 8 receptions for 80 yards and a TD. So he was working hard. But the thing, Spags defense is like, okay, you can run the football. Niners stuck to the run. It ran it 31 times for 110 yards, but they only got 3.5 per carry. So they were making sure they were hitting him. They let him eat before they went across the 50. And then as they got closer to the red zone, that defense really tightened up and had some key stops. As I said earlier, they held the Niners to 3 of 12 on third down. They were 1 of 1 on fourth down, but they made sure that they made life difficult for Purdy, and they were getting pressure on him, as you said, in the mode of deep Jim Johnson. Spagnuolo is one of his disciples. They were blitzing at key moments of the game, particularly on third down. That knockdown pass that I talked about that got them off the field and made them kick that field goal, that was huge. And the back part of that defense was doing a great job locking them down. And as you said, a lot of no names on that defense. Guys like Justin Reed, and they're not household names, but those guys were just getting after the Niners, putting a lot of pressure on a quarterback and getting it done. So, I felt pretty comfortable for the Chiefs. They were up 10-3. They were down 10-3 at the half. So you're like, okay, they're going to probably come out and make some changes going into the second half, and that's what Spagnuolo did.
I think it's one thing, and I'm going to say this as an Eagle fan, but I'm not a Homer Eagle fan. I can separate myself with this, but my phone was blowing up last night, as I'm sure yours was. How come the Eagles couldn't have played this Kansas City Chiefs team instead of the one they got last year? It's like, yeah, but at the same time, I'm thinking Mahomes probably did a better job this year than he did last year. He had a better team last year, and the fact that Patrick Mahomes willed that team to win, and that's what he does. And I think the first couple Super Bowls, I was like, all right, he's a good young quarterback. Oh, he won a couple Super Bowls. Watching him last night, it was actually, I don't know, you kind of appreciated him as, instead of just
Yeah,
watching him, you're appreciating what he did and the skill set that he brings. Because he doesn't have the biggest slinging arm. He doesn't, everything he does, he's not the best at. But as a cumulative quarterback, man, he is so good.
yeah, and he's just a winner. He's smart, changes play, and he runs when he needs to. You can't forget the story of this game without talking about him running. He ran 9 times for 66 yards, 2 huge runs on that game-winning drive. One was on third down, I believe. One was on fourth down, and he picked up a ton of yards to move the football and just real smart and protective of it. He said after the game that was a really bad interception that he threw. But, he's my game ball winner this week. 34 of 46, 73%, 333 yards passing, 2 TDs, 1 interception. He was sacked 3 times. So the Niners were getting some pressure on him. It was surprising. Chase Young, a guy who's kind of underachieved all year since the Niners got him from Washington, he got some pressure on him, and they weren't making his life uncomfortable. Kelsey only had 1 catch in the first quarter, first half. And you start, okay, Steve Wilkes on the other side, he's doing a pretty good job in this chess match. But as you said, Reed, Mahomes, Kelsey, Spagnuolo, they go in, they make the adjustments. It was good that sideline dust up didn't get blown up further when they were in the locker room. Even there was a Mahomes and Rashid Rice dust up where him and a receiver are on the same page. But it just seems like this team, they just know when to stick together and overcome in key situations. And as you said, they know as long as he is on the field, and him being Patrick Mahomes, they know they have a chance. And just cool, calm collective out there and did a great job in terms of, okay, we're down 3. We have a whole field to drive. We know what we have to do here, and they just got it done.
The one thing I do want to chime in with, because you said game ball for Patty Mahomes there. My game ball, if I'm going to throw one out there, Usher was busting his ass out there. Does anyone mention the man was roller skating out there? He was roller skating. And he came out. Everyone's like, Usher's sweaty. I'm like, he's busting his ass. He's working hard.
Yeah.
Alicia Keys looked great. I thought it was a good halftime show. I just want to throw that out there.
It was, and in terms of the shows and the Super Bowl parties. I actually we got invited to a party. I said, no, I'm going to go home. I'm going to stay home and watch the game. Uh, sometimes it's just too much watching with everybody else in the comments and who's not really watching. But I like the commercials too. Was watching them. I like the Christopher Walken one, where everybody's imitating him, and that was fun. And you have the Ben Affleck one with all his cronies for Dunkin' Donuts. And there was one other one I can't remember. The babies, I like the babies in the pickleball too. Where they were
Nice.
talking about it's just glorified tennis, but yeah, it was just they're spending a lot of money on them things, Kevin. And there was a couple you're like, oh, well, that's a lot of money for that crap,
My whole thing is it's
for
like
a match.
Their PR department has all year to come up with this big commercial. You got 30 seconds, the amount of money that you're spending, and then you see it. It's like, huh. Like I know last year when Dunkin' Donuts, it was the first Ben Affleck Super Bowl commercial with Dunkin' Donuts. He did a 30-second
Exactly.
spot for $10 million. $10 million for a
Wow.
30-second spot, let alone what everyone got this year. I was like, huh. You better have a home run hitter if you're going to sit there and spend that kind of money. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of donuts and coffee.
You
That's
ain't
crazy
lying.
because
Yep.
they had
A
J
lot of
Lo on
munchkins. A
there.
lot of munchkins.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but overall, I enjoyed the commercials, and now as we look, we start saying, okay, you got to start talking about dynasties and where he placed them in the pantheon of champions. Now we know in the 58-year history of the Super Bowl, there's never been a three-time champion back to back to back. Now the Cowboys came pretty close. They got stopped by the Niners. The Niners had a really big run to stop their back to back Cowboys season, and the Cowboys came back the next year and won it. So they won 3 and 4 years. But this Chiefs team has a chance to do something special. I've already talked to some folks. They're saying Andy Reid will be back. He's already saying that he's feeling recharged and ready to go. And we talked about Mahomes being 28. Kelsey's not going anywhere. Hopefully, when he comes back, he won't sing anymore. He's not a singer.
He's
Leave
in
that to his
love. He's in
girlfriend.
love.
Exactly. So, what are you thinking in terms of this Chiefs team? Can they go back to back to back, the first team to do it? And is there a team out there that if they get healthy, if everything comes right, can they challenge them?
One team in the AFC can take them out, and that is a healthy Joe Burrow. Joe
Ooh,
Burrow against Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I want to say he's like 6-1 combined against those two teams. Joe Burrow has no fear. Joe Burrow has that clutch gene and can win. But if he has a healthy team around him, a healthy offensive line, a better defense, that's the guy I think could take them out.
yeah, and talking about the Bengals, that's an interesting one because they're in a division. All the teams in that division had a winning record, and the Steelers made the playoffs as bad as they were in their quarterback situation, and we know Cleveland they had the comeback player of the year and Joe Flacco, and their defense isn't going nowhere. So yeah, the Bengals if they can get healthy and get back in the mix, they're going to have a chance. But I think that's a good pick. The Bills, I just think, the way they went in there and they just proved that, home field advantage didn't matter to them, even in cold Buffalo, that it's going to be tough for that Bills team to come back. Their window's kind of closing. You saw Stephon Diggs with the big drop in the playoffs. And there's just something amiss with that team. Sean McDermott's done a nice job with the Bills, but I just don't. Maybe they'll have a good draft or something, but I just don't see them at the level of the Chiefs. So I put them on the side. And then we talked about the Ravens earlier. Lamar Jackson's just got to get over that hump in terms of the playoffs. So yeah, he had a nice win in the first round of playoffs over the Texans, but all they needed was 2 wins. You know what I mean? They're home
Hmm.
and they were favored in both games. The Ravens had the defense and uh, they held the Chiefs on pretty low scoring. I think it was 17-10. And what's Lamar Jackson got to do to get to that next level? I mean, what are we looking at with them?
Well, the one thing is too, it's like Lamar Jackson appears at this point in his career to be one of those guys. MVP stat pattern during the regular season. Like in baseball, we had Greg Maddux back then, Hall of Fame pitcher. Don't get me wrong, but when we got to the postseason, he was a 500 pitcher. There's certain guys when the postseason light shines on them, they shrink a little bit. I don't know if they feel the pressure or not, but I mean, I don't know. With Baltimore, they always seem to have injuries. They always have running back injuries. They even got Andrews back for this championship game and everything else, but they can't put it together. And how long does Harbaugh have in Baltimore? He's been there forever, it
Yeah, well,
seems.
Bisciotti seems to like him, and I just, that's the owner. Yeah, I think they're going to keep giving him opportunities, but they're a team built around the run. And this is a passing league first. I know I'm a run guy, and I like teams that run the ball and play some defense. You got to do it eventually to win games, especially in the postseason. But their passing attack it just has a lot to be desired for Odell. I think Odell Beckham's done for them. He wasn't really showing much, and then you have Zay Flowers. Now Zay Flowers trying to become the next Ray Rice with his situation. We'll see how that plays.
Yep.
Um, what a mess that was. He had a pretty good season. His
That's a
rookie
shame.
season.
That is totally a shame because Zay Flowers, I thought they finally, because they got it wrong with Bateman when they drafted him with a first round pick.
Yes.
And then they got Flowers. I'm like, oh, you guys finally got it right. You finally got somebody. Then you hear what's coming out about Zay Flowers, and it's like, oh, good Lord, here we go again.
Yeah, yeah, he's gonna be trouble, and there was foreshadowing around what a pain in the butt he is in that game against the Chiefs. He had a bad penalty. He had to dive for the goal line, and it gets knocked out. That was the penultimate play of that game.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he scores there, the game's totally different. But I think the Ravens can compete in the. We'll see. In the AFC is not as wide open. Harbaugh's going to be interesting because now he'll be in division with the LA Chargers, with the Chiefs, but they have to fix their defense and everything, and we'll segue into the guy the Chargers got rid of, Kellen Moore. He's offensive coordinator now of the Philadelphia Eagles. So um, here on 102.9 The Game on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on Kevin Midgette. I'll give Kevin a chance to mull this over. We haven't talked since the end of the season and the Eagles collapse and all that. The Eagles surprised that we were like, oh, Sirianni, no way they bring him back. The Eagles bring back Sirianni, and now he's a figurehead with no power. and they bring in Vic Fangio to run the defense and Kellen Moore to run the offense. But what is Sirianni doing? And we know he's in the last season of his contract, and they bringing him back. We talk about contenders and all that stuff. Can the Eagles get this thing right and kind of compete with the Niners given this new structure at the top?
As an Eagles fan supporter, I would say best case scenario, hey, it'll be like Mike Tomlin. He'll sit there, he'll run the show, he'll let his coordinators coordinate, and we'll be just fine and finish 500 or better. As a realist, no, that's Jason Garrett. Nick Sirianni is going to be Jason Garrett. He is a puppet at this point for Howie and Jeffrey, and that's all it is. This cat's got 1 year left, and he's going to get run out. I like Kellen Moore. Fangio, they've wanted him for a couple of years now. That being said, it's pretty much, it seems like it's what was running in Miami, and then he's going to try to run it here. You got to find out what happens with Reddick on the defensive end with Philadelphia as well.
Yeah,
You got to replace the linebackers, the secondary. There's so much work that needs to be done on that defense right now. Kellen Moore, I'm okay with. Kellen Moore, I'm like, all right, yeah, let's give that one a shot. But as far as Sirianni goes, I think this is it. He gets 1 year, and if I tell you what, they get out of the gate bad, they'll cut his head early too.
Yeah, and
That's
you got a guy who was a former head coach at Fangio. I know it didn't end that well when he was with the Broncos, but he has that experience. And then you have Kellen Moore, who was a coach in waiting with the Chargers. So, he was the hot guy around the NFL at a certain point when he was at Dallas, and we'll see how that turns out. But the Eagles, yeah, I wonder if they're going to be able to make enough changes in the offseason, particularly with the draft, given how he does his report card for the draft is I give him C plus B minus range. Sometimes he hits, and then other times he takes Jalen Rieger over
Ugh.
you know over Justin Jefferson. That's just an example. So, there's a lot that needs to be fixed with the Eagles, and they're looking up at the Niners, and the
Oh, yeah.
Niners kicked their butt the last time they played them. The Niners do have their own cap structure and everything in terms of who's getting paid and this and that. We always know every season's different because certain guys are going to get paid and leave for other teams, and injuries are going to come into play and all that. So we'll see. But in terms of the Eagles, the big story, like the night before the Super Bowl, and I wanted to get your take on it. So they're saying Hassan Reddick has been told he's available for a trade. So I think a lot of this behind the scenes stuff we talked about, the players only meetings and everybody not be on the same page. And what is your take in terms of Hassan Reddick? Will he be back? And then also AJ Brown, who was a malcontent at the end of the season, will he be back?
I think there's a lot of hurt feelings in that locker room on both sides of the ball. There's something that happened that we will not be privy to all the information. But when you go from 10-1 to just falling down as bad as they did, something was up. And once again, the coaches, Sirianni, the coordinators, everyone was a blind lifeguard at the pool. They can hear everyone drowning, but they didn't do anything to save them either. They just let everything happen and go down the slippery slide. Someone has to come in there and mend these fences. Reddick, he's your best pass rusher. Why is he dropping in the coverage? Why is he dropping in the coverage? I mean, it's stupidity about all this. You had Desai, then you had Mr. Yellow, number 2 pencil, Patricia there, and it just made no sense whatsoever. And one thing also we were talking about, Philadelphia's looking up at San Francisco. The Philadelphia, in my mind, they're looking up at Detroit. They're looking up at Green Bay at this point. They're falling down further and further, and you got to think somebody at division's got to get better at some point. Well, not Washington or New York, but somebody's got to. It just,
Yeah, you
I
want
don't know. They have to do something in that locker room to change the culture.
Yeah, and you wonder how this is all going to play out. It's going to be an interesting off season, and then I'm hearing that analytics is coming into play and how this team is driving, how they're deciding on different decisions, and guess who's running our analytics department? It's Jeffrey Lurie's son. I mean,
No way.
it's
Get out.
just like
No nepotism in this world. No.
yeah. So it's just like Medland City with the owner, his handpicked general manager who's Teflon. It's just like a lot of moving parts. And then you cannot forget about the most important player, and I always talk about this with everybody. It's Jalen Hurts. He's being paid like a top line quarterback, $45 million plus a season, and he had 23 touchdowns, 15 interceptions this year. Did not run the ball as effectively as before, maybe an injury or whatever have you, but he just was not the same guy, and that affected this Eagles team. So can Jalen Hurts bounce back? And it's going to be interesting to see whether him and Kellen Moore can get on the same page.
I think Jalen Hurts needs continuity. I think they've been switching the script in and out on him since he's been with the Eagles. He needs somebody who's going to be there and is going to be there for a little bit. If I'm not mistaken, Jalen's what, 25? I think he's about
Yeah,
25.
he's still very young. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like, and the thing is, when he went from college to college, switching around, and gets to the pros, and they're switching guys in and out. Give this guy some stability. Let him sit there and build on that. And the thing is, you're going to have to worry about now is locking because you're going to have to pay Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. What are you doing with that? It's like your running back situation. Get somebody. I'm tired of this 3-headed monster that really does nothing. I don't need to see Kenny Gainwell anymore. Boston Scott, I think, is finally going, and I love Boston Scott like everyone else. Don't get me wrong. But let's get some guys here and the offensive line for that, in fact. Is Kelsey coming back? Who are the leaders on this unit now? I mean, there's a lot still going on with this franchise.
Yeah, and I just this morning I was listening to an interview with Kelsey from Super Bowl week on Radio Row, and he kept saying the Eagles and they will be okay next year. That kind of talk, and I was like, oh, he's not coming back. He's going to retire, and you can't blame him. He's 36 years old. He survived all those years in the trenches. Yeah, he would have wished probably to go out on top a little bit better. But he was all first team All Pro, and I just wonder about the desire. He has the podcast. I think he's going to do. He'll be the next Jeff Saturday. You know what I mean? Sean O'Hare. I mean, they're all former setters on TV. I could see Jason Kelsey doing that. He's very popular. He has a young family, and I think his wife wants him to retire. So, what do you think about Kelsey? And I'll throw in Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. Do you think they come back? You know, they were the cornerstone at 2017 that won the Super Bowl. Do you think these guys will be back at the Eagles?
Jason Kelsey, I think for the most part, I think he hung out the last year or two because the Eagles were a competitive team at that time. There was a chance for the Super Bowl, but legacy Super Bowl or Super Bowl, I should say, Hall of Fame, Canton, and everything else. And I think Kelsey actually achieved that hanging around these last couple of years. And I don't want to say hanging around in a bad way, but playing at that level, I think that
Yeah.
solidified his Canton bust right there. That being said, the man's got a family and future to think about. He has a career in broadcasting that's definitely going to happen. He could be the football equivalent of Charles Barkley. He's that kind of outspoken with
Yeah.
some hilarious comments and everything else. I think he can be that guy. So if Jason Kelsey walks away, good for him, man. You earned it. Do that. As far as BG goes, Brandon Graham, I've never been more surprised by a guy I booed the first couple years of his career
And
than I was
how
Brandon
about
Graham.
that, Kevin? You talk about first round Howard Roseman bust. I mean, they traded up to get Brandon Graham. He
Mhm.
started slowly. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He'll never live up to that first round
Earl
grade,
Thomas.
and but well beloved in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah, everyone cried Earl Thomas, and then you see Brandon Graham with a strip sack on Tom Brady. Earl Thomas, who? What happened to Earl Thomas these last couple years?
Yeah,
And the thing
and
is,
who made?
Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox were killing it in that playoff game.
Yeah, they played hard, and the thing is, Fletcher Cox, I think he was on a 1 year deal this year. I think he may try to go somewhere else to greener pastures, and as these guys get older and they've won already, maybe they want that last payday, and you
Oh
wonder,
yeah, I don't
will
begrudge
he go
anybody their
somewhere else?
money. I've never begrudged any athlete their money. Get paid while you can. The owners can be a situational guy for definitely for a contending team. I think he's got a year or two, at least one solid year left in him.
Yeah, and speaking of holdouts and getting paid, I think Chris Jones, who held out, that first week he did not play and everything, big contract situation. He took the franchise tag this year with the Chiefs. I think he's going to be one of those guys. If you remember Richard Seymour at his peak, he left the Patriots because they weren't going to pay him. He goes to the Raiders. So I think Chris Jones, if somebody gives him the bag, he's going to be out of there too. So and as you said, you can't begrudge these guys their opportunity to get paid because in the NFL, this money's not really guaranteed. And you saw with Dre Greenlaw,
Yeah.
he tears his Achilles just kind of going out from the sidelines to the field. So it's nothing's promised out there in the NFL, not for long.
Yeah, when that injury happened last night in the Super Bowl to him, it reminded me of was it Navarro Bowman when the same thing happened to him? He got injured himself, and you're gone for a whole season after that. It's not like you're bouncing back by training camp, and that's a shame, because there's only so many years in an NFL player's career to lose one for that.
Yeah, and you talk about the Achilles. We can't talk about the Achilles without the biggest Achilles in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers, what a mess there, in terms of the Jets. And we talk about coaches on the hot seat they're going to go into this season on hot seat. So we talk about Sirianni, we talk about McCarthy with Dallas, Salah and Matt Eberflus with the Bears. I don't know how these guys save their jobs. They're coming in the next season, still head coaches. And you wonder about the Jets and Salah. They're going to bring the whole band back together. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to come back? I think it's still a disaster waiting to happen. I think there's a lot more sideline blowups and things going to happen next season.
I think the New York Jets actually they have talented skill set players. They do have like Brees Hall, the way he played at the end of the season. I was impressed. I was like, really? And
Yeah.
then the wide receivers, they have some wide receivers. Aaron Rodgers cannot play a 17 game schedule. Aaron Rodgers is going to miss 3 games here, maybe 4 games there. And especially with the media scrutiny of New York City. It's not Green Bay, it's not Appleton where they're sitting there writing puff pieces about you, Aaron. They're going to sit there and they're going to be grilling you. They're going to be raking you over the coals about all of the stuff that you do. And I don't think he has the skin for it. I remember when Randy Johnson went from the Arizona Diamondbacks to the New York Yankees. What did he do on his first or second day there? He pushed a photographer with his hand. I see Aaron Rodgers not having the thick skin for New York City.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And we also had a hiring cycle, and Belichick does not get a job. Does he come back? Does he get an opportunity somewhere? They said the Falcons might have been interested, but then and I knew it was coming. There was a play for. He says he didn't want it, but I know he wanted to have the whole kit and caboodle. He wanted to run the show, and they kind of backed off of him, and they go with Raheem Moore. But this late in coaching cycle, did you see any new coaches come in? Anybody excite you or anything? And does Belichick come back?
I think Belichick's done. I think he was trying to hang out for the wins to break Shula's record, and he's not going to be able to. I don't see Belichick sitting around for a year and then being like, "All right, let me come back." There's certain guys that all they can do is coach, and I'll call out basketball. Larry Brown from the Philadelphia 76ers. What did he end up doing? He was coaching like SMU in college after that. After he won the championship with the Pistons, after he left the Sixers, that guy loved to coach. Rick Pitino, he got busted for violations. What did he do? He went to Europe and coached for a year during his suspension, and now he's at St. John's. Like certain guys, they just love to coach. Belichick's not that guy.
Wait, you mean Belichick wouldn't be good on TV?
No, my
Can you
that
imagine?
personality, yeah. The Dower Hour with
Oh,
Bill Belichick.
the pregame shows are bad enough, but you can imagine putting him on there, and he's mumbling the whole time. And
You
what
know
I
what would
would
be
love is
hilarious? You know what would be hilarious,
what
Lloyd? The Puppy Bowl next year, broadcasted by Bill Belichick. All these cute puppies running around and Bill Belichick just frowning the whole time. That'd
yeah,
be great.
put him on Nickelodeon. Let's see
Yeah,
how that
the
works
slime
out.
time, yes.
You kidding me? And as you said, his time is come and gone. And he had a great career, Hall of
Oh,
Fame
yeah.
career. But yeah, you talk about a guy hanging on, trying to get wins. Enough's enough. It's like Johnny Unitas in the Chargers uniform back in
Ooh,
the day.
yeah.
Seeing that, you're like, all right, enough's enough. And so he didn't get a job, but we talked about Jim Harbaugh comes from Michigan, national championship. He's going to go with the Chargers. We have Mike McDonald. He got the opportunity with Seattle. Um, Dan Quinn, that was interesting. Dan Quinn, is Washington ever going to clean themselves up? I don't know if that was the right hire. Dan Quinn, and then they also Bieniemy, I thought, did a pretty good job for them in terms of their offense this year. Bieniemy doesn't get a job, but Dan Quinn's there in Washington. They got a new owner, Joshua Harris. Speaking of basketball guys, but I just don't know if they're ever going to get it right there. I really do.
No, not at all. And it's once again, as an Eagles fan, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with Washington never getting it right. I'm cool with Jerry Jones living to be 150 because they'll never get it right. The thing is with these new hires for coaches, a lot of young blood coming in. Yeah, I mean, you lose Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick right there. That's almost 150 years right off the books. And you sit there and you get these younger guys in their 30s starting to come in. It's like, all right, and Andy Reid, he's the old guy now. It's just weird how that turns.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm all for these younger guys getting an opportunity, and Antonio Pierce proved himself as the interim head coach, going 5 for the Raiders, and did a nice job. I think he's going to do well there, and I'll talk about another coach that didn't get a job. Ben Johnson decides to stick with the Lions, and there were a lot of opportunities for him out there. I always say strike while the iron's hot, but he wants to stay with the Lions. The Lions. We didn't get to really talk about this. I gave my lackey to Dan Campbell because I just thought sometimes he was just too over aggressive, and it bit him in the butt. So what are you thinking in terms of Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell? They said they're going to run this thing back, but as we talk about, every season's different, and I they got a lot of work to do there with Detroit.
The one thing with Detroit, I mean, once great season for them, absolutely great season.
Yeah,
Laporta was a great draft pick. St. Brown, they have their weapons there. Even Jameson Williams, he came on towards the end. He started playing and everything else. Jameer Gibbs, I can go on. Campbell is one of those guys, man. He is like someone who just had a six pack and keeps playing John Madden, and he's calling these plays on fourth down. He doesn't need a punter, and he keeps going for it. And it's just like, dude, pull it in a little bit. Like I just get back to that Dallas game. It's like, was it a bad penalty? Yeah, but once again, when you're backed up to the 7 yard line, kick the extra point, kick it. And this guy, he's one of these guys. It seems like he can't get out of his own way. And maybe Johnson in his thought process is like, I'm gonna let this guy burn out. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to wait for him to do his stuff, and I'm going to sit here and take everything over. I don't know that thought, but as well as Jared Goff, I still don't know what to think about this guy. To this day, I don't know what to think about Jared Goff. Do I
Yeah,
like him or not like him?
he's a solid pro, is what he is. And he, Cam was talking about game managers. That's what Jared Goff. He's a guy. He'll win you certain games, but in the big spots, you can't trust him. You just can't. And we'll see how he does. But he's another guy. You talk about pedigree. Everybody always talks about, Brock Purdy was the last player taking the draft. Well, you have Jared Goff. He was the number one overall pick, and you're always going to debate whether him or Baker Mayfield were they really worth that slot. But as you said, that division is tough. The NFC North. Yeah, the Vikings on the comeback trail. We'll see what they do with Kirk Cousins. I really like, as you said, the Green Bay Packers, what they're doing. So, every season's different. There's a magical season for the Lions. Made the playoffs for the first time, got a playoff win. But, everybody's already forgot about it. So,
Oh yeah.
the page will turn in March, and it'll be a new NFL year. So, talk to me about the Lions a little bit. And I think a big thing is Aaron Glenn, their defense coordinator. He's got to do a better job in terms of that defense. That defense just let up way too many points. They were in too many track meet type games this season.
And that's the thing. And you have a good upfront unit with that. In the trenches, you're okay. It's just like they sit there and get smoked in the middle. Once again, like the Eagles, as much as that with secondary and everything else. Detroit, though, you have to sit there and think about the fact it's just once you get a lead and you can run the ball, they need to get some. I think it's almost everyone in the league now, it seems like, Lloyd, except for the teams that win the Super Bowl. The linebacker play, nobody has anymore. They don't scheme that way. The safeties aren't what they used to be because you're not allowed to hit as much. And the corners, everyone plays off the receivers. You don't see the attack anymore because I think
Yeah.
the league
And
wants points scored.
Yeah, and then when they go into the draft, that we're coming to draft season, they're all they devalue these linebackers and safeties. They don't want to. They've always don't want to pick them high, and they also don't want to pay them. So you see a lot of these guys moving around. You're not going to see a lot of Harrison Smith, who's been with his entire career with the Minnesota Vikings, had a good career, and they always think they can use Scotch tape and bubble gum to fix the linebackers and the safeties. I know particularly we talk about the Eagles. They're guilty of it so many times. And why not? One of the greatest Eagles in recent history is Brian Dawkins. Why not try to find that next Brian Dawkins, somebody that's a difference maker? And your free safety is typically like John Lynch was, who's running the Niners now. That's that guy that is quarterback of your defense. So the NFL being a passing league first, yes, you need safeties that can cover, also can deduce everything, get everybody in the right places. But also, you're right, you need two linebackers that can thump, but they also need to be able to cover as well. And you saw even with the Chiefs, with Bolton, and then the Niners, Greenlaw and Warner, they're the prototypical. If you have two guys like that in the middle of your defense, because it's a big nickel now. Nobody's playing basically a true 4-3 anymore, where you have three linebackers out there. You got to have at least two guys that can cover.
Well, it's one of those things. The biggest running joke in Philadelphia was the linebacker one. When's the last time the Eagles took a linebacker with the first round? Everyone knows 1979, Jerry Robinson. Everyone knows
That's
that
right.
one. Yeah. And it's like
They
growing up
love,
in my
they
go
love,
ahead.
they love, they love the Chris Kokon type at
Oh God,
linebacker.
Griff Kokon. Like I grew up in my day. It's like my favorite Eagle defensive player of all time. Actually, second favorite Eagle of all time, Seth Joyner, number
Oh,
59.
Seth
But
Man. Oh yeah,
but on the other side,
Byron
we had
Evans.
we had Willie Thomas, we had Byron Evans in the middle. It's like we had some hitters there. We had some linebackers, and it was
Yeah,
like, man, I can't tell you the last time I felt confident in a linebacker in Philadelphia.
yeah, and the Eagles they got to get it right. You can't watch the way the Niners dismantled them with Warner and Greenlaw and the way they play. I know Greenlaw's hurt now, but you got to have somebody in the middle because too often they were beat on those crossing patterns. And that's what teams are running. They're running the slot receiver across the middle. They're running the tight ends who are very athletic now, like Travis Kelsey and a bunch of other guys. Pitts down in the Falcons. These guys are just big receivers. And you got to have somebody that's able to cover them, cover the middle of the field because um, yeah, teams are going to try to run the football here and there if you're too light. But if you have a guy in the middle that can do both, why not? And it's going to be interesting to see if the Eagles will. We all know the number one linebacker this season is Jeremiah Trotter's son
Oh
out of
yeah.
Clemson. And,
Oh yeah.
and we'll see if the Eagles actually take the opportunity to draft him because they need it. They need help in the middle, and so many other teams do. So I think a lot of teams are going to compete for him. So before I let you go, Kevin, it was awards week. Something to talk about.
Oh yeah.
Um, C.J. Stroud was just tremendous. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year. Um, no turnovers the last 4 games. Played very well in the playoffs, and then they have Willie Anderson, the Defensive Player of the Year. So, do you think the Texans can maintain their ascension, having the Defensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year? Where do we see the Texans?
I think they're legit. And the way that Stroud was throwing that ball in the playoffs, he had no fear whatsoever. If you watch that first playoff game, he's just whipping it. Was it a 70-yard touchdown to start the first playoff game? I'm like, that kid
Yeah.
has no worries whatsoever, man. And the fact is, if they get their wide receivers back healthy, the ones they have, they're going to be Nico Collins, was it Tank Dell? There's someone else in that mix as well. But I mean, they got some weapons. And CJ Stroud has that look. You know who hates watching CJ Stroud games? Bryce Young. He just sits there and feels bad about himself. It's like, I wish I was that guy.
Yeah, and speaking, we'll segue to that. Yeah, the Bears have big decisions to make. They get the first overall pick because Carolina traded that boatload, and now the Bears have 2 picks in the top 10 and number one overall. Um, I think it's going to be Caleb Williams out of USC. I'm not as big college football guy as I used to, but I watched him enough to say, okay, that's the guy. It was interesting. I'm watching ESPN, me and my son, and you get Tim Hasselbeck on there, and he immediately is like, Drake May is better. He's the guy that I would take over Caleb Williams. What do you think? And I know we'll talk about the draft a little bit more, but what do you think at the top of the draft? And some people are saying Williams does not want to go to the Bears, but do you really have a choice?
I think Caleb Williams is going to be a pain in the ass. I'm not even skirting the issue on this. I have a whole thing, how I think about USC quarterbacks to begin with. I'm not a big USC
Mm-hmm.
quarterback guy. With your Leinerts, your Barkleys, you have to go back to like Carson Palmer, to one that was decent and semi good for the
Yeah.
most part. So, and the fact is, when I hear a guy already coming out saying what teams he does want to play for, what he doesn't want to play for, he's a pain in the ass. May can he looks good at college. He looks good at North Carolina. He seems like the kind of guy New England would draft. That kind of thing. And you don't know anymore with these guys. You just don't know. The college game is so spread out, and they can hang these numbers that you don't even know about. And once they get more confined, better defensive players, all of a sudden it's like, oh no, he can't play. Like, you really don't know with quarterbacks. And the sad
And
thing
that's
is,
you got
you're
to be
gambling your
careful.
whole franchise on it.
You do, and the coach is going to get fired. And you see, yeah, Frank Reich, he hit. I heard Frank Reich didn't even really want Bryce Young, but they stuck him with him, and he got him fired. These bonus baby first round quarterbacks, they're coach killers, and you got to get it right because, as you said, if you get it wrong, you're both going to be out of town. And you talk about Mac Jones. They already got rid of Belichick. I think Mac Jones is going to be out the door as well, and maybe he'll. They always seem to find a new home. These young first round quarterbacks. They bounce around for a little bit. I think Zach Wilson. What do you think? Do you think he gets a job somewhere? Because I'm hearing the Jets are going to get rid of him, and you know
I tell
why
you what,
not? He's
I would
great.
take Zach Wilson over Mac Jones over Marcus Mariota. I would take Zach Wilson over that. It's like you got Jameis still has a job. It's like all these guys, they hang around. You know.
They do. They do. They somehow, and then some of them, like Baker Mayfield, they get that bounce back season this season. It's his fourth team, and he led the Bucks to a playoff victory, and they're talking about maybe bringing back. And then how about the comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco? I mean, the guy he's almost as old as us.
Yeah.
He's like, and he came off the couch and Blackwood, New Jersey guy, and he looked like he was done after the Eagles traded him to the Jets. Played terrible for the Jets, and then he goes to the Browns, and man, what a season for him.
Well, even like Ryan Tannehill did the same thing. We thought Tannehill was done. Ended up in Tennessee, and all of a sudden he's winning playoff games. It's like so.
Yeah, he
It
got
depends on
Arthur
the certain
Smith that.
situation.
Yeah, so I mean, Flacco, that was a great season by him. We'll see if he's able to come back. And he got Stefanski, the Coach of the Year award. I was a little on the fence about that. I thought maybe D'Amico Ryans would have got some more votes because I thought he did a great job with that team. Let's not forget, they won like, 4 games last year. I thought, as we said, the Texans, they're young, they're ascending, they're popular. He did a great job with them.
I think D'Amico Ryans deserved to win that. To be honest, I think with Cleveland though, they're the lovable losers. They're the football equivalent of the Chicago Cubs back in the day. It's like, oh, let's give them a little something. Oh, we got, it's one of those things. It's like you must pat them on the back of the head when they lose.
Yeah.
It's like people want the Browns to win. Houston, on the other hand, a newer franchise for the most part compared to everyone else. But yeah, Ryans killed it this year. I thought he did a great job.
It did. And so and then it will bring it back to the Saints. What's going on, Saints? They're another one. They brought back Dennis Allen. How did that happen? Dennis Allen, another one of these coaches. Yeah, he won a couple I think they won the last 2 games, but I think the other team was sitting people. How did Dennis Allen come back? And Eberflus, I talked about him earlier, but how are these guys keeping their jobs?
Well,
Is it
first,
just a money thing?
I think the thing goes to these guys have signed contracts, and owners don't like to pay guys money to go away. Unless you have something better that's going to come in there and take the spot, it's like, well, I'm paying you anyway. I might as well have you here. And the fact with the NFC South, it's a terrible division. It's like, all right, when we
Oh,
sit there, tweak this, tweak that, we got a shot of going to the playoffs.
yeah. You have poor Dan Canales who did a nice job with the Bucks offense. He got stuck with that Carolina job,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody had to take it, and we'll see if they're able to pick up the pieces there. But just so many teams are their makeup and everything's changing. But it's the Chiefs' time. It's they were dominant, did a great job. Before I let you get out of here, what did you? I thought CBS did a good job not showing too much Taylor Swift shots here and
Yeah.
there, but at the end, I mean, they kept that camera on them for a while when they having a little conversation and the kissing and all that stuff. I was like, all right, so there's 53 guys on this team. Show somebody else.
Yeah, all the tween girls have gone to bed by now. They don't need to keep Taylor Swift on here. One thing I have to point out about the whole broadcast, and once again, it's not because he's a cowboy. I think you know where I'm going with this. Tony Romo's terrible. He is so bad. Like literally,
He's
he
awesome.
sat there and talked over every single moment. It's like, shutty, let it play out, man. You don't have to talk all the time.
Yeah, and it was interesting on a game-winning play. Mahomes throws it to Hardman, the game's over, and Nance didn't really make his call. He's jumping in there and told, "Whoa, did you see that?" Oh, and like, all right, enough already. And the funny thing is, Tom Brady now has been paid more money than Romo, and he's going to be Fox's #1 guy. So we'll see. He's still kind of stiff to me, and in the
I don't
booth.
see
So
it.
we'll see how he.
The money that they're paying
It
Tom
was good
Brady,
money,
though,
right?
I mean, just seeing Tom Brady doing interviews throughout his career and everything else, it's just like, I don't know how he's going to do in that gig. I like Olsen. I like
Yeah,
Olsen on Fox.
yeah, and it's work. It's work. These guys. One of my buddies is a play-by-play guy, and I talk to him, and he's always studying. He's always studying next week's matchup, and you just wonder about these superstar guys, and like we were saying about Romo, is he doing this? Is he doing the homework that he once did? Because you have to be on top of every little thing when you have that broadcast.
The one guy I was so impressed with, it was Brian Gumble was doing his HBO gig, and it was when Troy Aikman covering games and everything, and the work that Troy
Yeah.
Aikman puts into his broadcast,
Yes.
and it was just, I was impressed. I was like, wow, you don't see a Hall of Fame guy like doing what Troy Aikman was doing to be prepared for that game, and I don't think Tony Romo does that.
Yeah, and I was at with Troy. I remember at an Eagles practice in the bubble, and I was just watching him, and I think it was him and Daryl Johnston, just watching them the pregame work that they do. So some of the guys you got to tip your cap to them. So another great week on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Broad Street South Network. Uh, we got Kevin all squared away in terms of that mic sounded good.
$40 well spent, Lloyd.
Huh?
$40 well spent.
There it is. So it was great having him. We appreciate Angel jumping on. I know he just traveled back from Vegas. He's probably jet lagged, so we appreciate him doing the production on this. And another great week here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. And we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Good.
Yeah, good stuff. Yep.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah, no,
$40 well
Kevin,
spent.